Hi everyone, how are we doing today? We often hear a lot about hard work and you've got to work, you've got to have a job, you've got to make money. It's important that you get up and stay motivated and stay driven in life. You've got to have a job. You absolutely have to have a job. You absolutely have to work your ass off, especially as a man anyway. But you kind of get this thing of like this whole thing of it's wrong for you to be unemployed. It's wrong for you to not have any money. It's wrong for you to not have enough money. It's wrong for you to not have the right kind of work. You should. You are supposed to have your shit together as a man very quickly and maintain it. I can tell you in the context of the UK, certainly during my lifetime, and especially if you've come from somewhere like I have in the north or the northeast of England, then I can tell you that work doesn't pay for the average person. It doesn't pay. It's not secure anymore. There are very few stable contracts. And probably like a lot of other parts of the West these days, inflation's it's gone through the roof. Costs of living have got massively out of control. And it's just becoming more and more miserable for the average person. It's becoming more and more just unaffordable to have any real quality of life over there. And it's happening here in Thailand as well. Things are going up all the time over here. It's especially with prices of food. I mean, yeah, it's still some things are a bit cheaper compared to the West, but things are definitely, costs are definitely going up steadily over here as well. And I was just thinking about that a few minutes ago, like, when you really think about it, a lot of it's a huge scam because, you take a job, let's just say an average job with an average salary, you live a kind of, very kind of mediocre existence because you can't really afford to splash out on any kind of real great conveniences or just anything that would really make your life more interesting or better, really. Over time, your salary is devaluing. It's becoming less and less. Over time, your salary is actually reducing, technically, economically speaking, because with inflation rising, with the cost of living going up, and even just generally speaking, even before we had all of this stuff going on with Ukraine and Russia, and so whatever's leading to all of this inflation, I assume it's probably to do with issues in the markets and financial markets, and the pound probably weakening over time. It's obviously in the UK, but I assume it's the case with the dollar in the US and probably other parts of the world. I'm guessing maybe it's to do with prices of oil. I don't really know. Look, I'm not I'm an economist or anything. I don't know all of the nitty-gritty stuff, the micro, macro elements of what's going on with inflation, but I know that it's having a massive impact on the average, the average person's life, as far as things that used to be affordable, things that used to be even cheap at one time. And now these days, everything's gone up, probably good over the last couple of years. A lot of things have probably gone up, maybe 10, 20%, maybe more, 30% maybe. And it's just making, and obviously at the same time as food prices, you've got energy prices have spiked a lot over recent years, probably in an effort to try and push the green agenda on everybody. Or at least probably I'm guessing a part of it. And so over time, like your money is not worth as much anymore. It's becoming, so actually in essence, you're actually working for less and less as time goes on. As the costs of living increase, your salary isn't worth as much as it used to be. So then you essentially, over every so many years, you're having to budget more and more and more, and be more and more cautious with whatever money you've got left over, if you're lucky enough to have any money left over, once you've paid your bills and for your food and internet, whatever, if you've got a car maybe. But let's face it, at the end of the day, it's like people say, you're better off in work. It's better to be in work than to be unemployed. Well, yeah, it's only in as far as, like, you can say that I'm not unemployed. Only in as far as saying, I can afford to have my own place, I guess. If you're lucky enough to get a house, if you can buy one, or if you can rent somewhere that's affordable enough. Good luck with that. And that's why so many people in UK now, so many people are living at home with their parents into their 30s. Some people are probably even moving back home into their parents' home because they just can't afford it. It's just becoming ridiculous. And it's employment's all good and well as far as having a bit of self-respect, I guess. But as far as, like, medium to long-term benefits, is work really truly worth it? It's like if you're working, grafting your ass off 5 or 6 days a week, just so you can pay your bills, just so you can pay for your food, maybe have the odd holiday once in a while, pay, have an average car, an average lifestyle, let's say. How is work really making your life? Is it really making your life better? Because all you've got really is a bunch of responsibilities now that you didn't have before. And you could say, well, it's better to have some degree of responsibility and some kind of a pressure and stress, maybe because it motivates you to some extent. But if work's not really helping you to elevate you in life, to so that you can move beyond, if you to help you to move beyond your current circumstances, then to me work's not worth it. Because if you're not earning enough money in which you can climb the social ladder, whatever, climb out of relative poverty for whatever reasons you happen to find yourself in it, whether it's because of your parents or economic decline, or it's just economic stagnation, whatever it is, it's like, is it really worth it in the end? Yeah, sure, it's good to have money. Sure, it's nice to be able to, say, invite your friends around or whatever. It's like, but it also means that it's like, do you really have any quality of life though? It's like, yes, you don't, let's face it, you don't really have any real quality of life while you're unemployed because you've got no money, but at least you've got some degree of, like, freedom, I guess, to some extent. You've certainly got more time to yourself, but you haven't got any money to do anything with it. So that's not fucking ideal. Let's not kid ourselves. But in work, you're under constant stress and pressure as well, because you have a number of responsibilities in your job, and HR is always fucking out to try and get you on something, to try and replace you, if they can, for whatever reason they just don't like you, or so you're always expected to know your place in the pecking order at work, So always hyper competitiveness with colleagues, and endless drama and gossip you got to tolerate, and bullshit from your manager or assistant manager or whatever, your boss. And in the end it's like, is it worth it? Is it worth tolerating for minimum wage? Or even if you just earn slightly more than minimum wage, is it really worth it? I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is, but part of me thinks in some ways that it's not, because if you can't elevate yourself beyond your status because you don't earn enough money to be able to do that, and you can't really save enough money to be able to do that, then is it really worth it for you to keep grafting your ass off every single day of the week for a day or two rest, for that one 1 week holiday you can have every year? I don't know. I don't know. But you can't survive without money, can you? You have to have some kind of income some way, or some kind of way of getting money to survive in this world. That's just that's just a fact. There's no way around it. So you have to have money somehow, whether that's doing it through legal means or illegal means. I'm not suggesting people should go down the latter route, but I can understand why some people do it. I can understand why some people end up committing fraud and getting involved in all sorts of dodgy schemes, and trying to con people out of money. It's like, of course it's wrong. I'm not in any way suggesting that anyone should ever do anything like that. I'm just saying that I understand it sometimes. I understand why people get involved in drugs and prostitution and all sorts of illegal, illicit activities. I get it to a point. I don't think that it's moral in any way. It's wrong. But when you live in an economy where if you're not of a certain IQ level, if you're not someone that's got a trade, if you're not someone who has a skilled job, whether it's a low skilled or highly skilled job, whatever it is, some kind of a skilled form of employment, then you're kind of screwed, really. It's like, because you've got two choices. You either end up on, if you've got some kind of a welfare system, not everywhere does, but if you've got some way of getting money that way, then you can choose to do that, or you can choose to take a number of part-time, short-term periods of employment with some dodgy agencies that are going to try and exploit you. Are going to make your life a living hell, a misery, and they don't care about your rights and your comfort and employment rights and all that kind of shit. They couldn't give a fuck about you. They're just in it to make a buck out of you. So that means you'll end up going into some shitty warehouse factory jobs, probably that you don't get enough adequate training for. They're cutting corners, and they're not abiding by health and safety regulations, etc., etc. And so you get caught up in this world of like low self-worth, low self-confidence, self-esteem in tatters, and then you just end up in, if you're not careful, you end up in this cycle of unemployment and short-term employment, because it ends up ruining your mental health, and so it becomes harder and harder to want to get into a position mentally where you can, because, and the thing is well, not everyone's got it. I don't think everyone's cut out to take on skilled positions. I just don't think everyone has the and I don't mean it. I'm not saying that people are stupid. I'm just saying I just don't think everyone has the kind of right mental makeup for it. You know, some people are more thinkers than kind of, sort of, more kind of like DIY minded kind of people, or you kind of trade minded types of people. They have a very kind of specific type of kind of logic, and it's not everyone thinks like that. Not everyone operates like that. I as far as I can tell, anyway. And I think as well, on top of it, there's just not enough opportunities for people. Populations keep expanding. Excuse me. The population keeps growing. The economy's changing all the time. There's, far fewer jobs now than there has ever been. And there's just not enough opportunities for people. It's all good. It's all good and well when you're young, when you're 16 or 18 or what, in your early 20s, because you're more likely to be given an opportunity for apprenticeships or training. But as you get older, and the thing is, not everyone really knows what they want to do when they're younger. And this is coming from my own personal experience, but I've seen it a lot in other people, and I know that I'm not the only one out there. Not everyone knows what they want to do when they leave school or by the time they become an adult. And so you kind of get lost in this pathway in life where you don't know what the fuck you're doing. You don't know what to do with yourself. You don't. If you don't have any real keen interests, or you don't really know what your interests are. I think really in the day, it's like, if you don't have the right kind of role models, if you don't come from the right stock, if you don't have the right intelligence, if you're not kind of, cognitively competent in certain ways, then you're kind of fucked. It's like you better have some good luck on your side, or you better figure out something very quickly. In the UK, it's not ideal, let me tell you, but at least they've got a welfare system, and it's far from perfect. But at least, and I'm not suggesting here that people should be on welfare, that people should be unemployed. I'm not saying that. I don't think that's the way that people should live either. My point here is that you have to ask yourself at some point, whether work really pays, whether work is really truly beneficial for you or not. It's like, yeah, it can have some conveniences, it can make your life a little bit more comfortable. But to me, that's all kind of a bit superficial, because if you can't afford to save up enough money to move, to buy a house that you really want, because your contract's not really stable enough, or you just don't earn enough money, or you just don't get enough hours, then I don't know. I think employment should pay. It should be reasonable, and it's not reasonable. It's very unfucking reasonable, and employers don't give a fuck. They're out to make a profit. They're out to use you to make a profit. They don't care about you. They're only interested in what you've got to offer. What can you bring to the table? How can you help my company make money? Or at least, keep my company afloat. Keep my company from going into debt. It's all just competition. It's all just endless capitalism, and if you're smart, or rather if you're blessed, let's say, with certain capabilities, then you might become a successful tradesperson, or if you're really good at art, you might be really good I don't know, whatever it is, music or painting or whatever, sculpting, drawing, then you might be able to make a living as an artist, just about. But for the average person, and I really do mean that, and I don't mean to sound disrespectful when I say that, but I just mean, the average Joe Blogs on the street, that they've got no chance of ever breaking out of the cycles of relative poverty that their families have gone through for generations. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen unless you can figure some way of getting other forms of income. It's like, but often you need money. That's the problem. You need money to make money. You need money to make more money. And it's like, when you see these videos of the Holocaust, and when you see these signs above the gates of places like Dachau and Auschwitz and places like that, they, as everyone I'm sure probably knows it off by heart by now, but work makes you free. I don't know if it's work makes you free or work sets you free. I'm not exactly sure, but it's something along those lines. It's like, well, how true is that? How does work really make you free? Because work certainly gives you the ability to be able to afford more things, but then that often comes with you. It depends what you want, but like if it's something that's really useful to you, it's probably going to cost you a bit of money, and probably you're going to be paying off installments. And often, there's always the threat of going into debt. So, to me, it's not about hard work. It's about like the threat of, it's the threat of not being responsible. It's the threat of, the consequences of being perceived as being carefree. It's the consequences of it's just to not work means the consequences of not working are unemployment, and to be unemployed means that you don't have any money or you have very little money. So that's definitely not an ideal outcome to find yourself in, is it? Especially if you live in a country where welfare is extremely difficult to get, or it's a nightmare to be on it, which is often the case these days. And to some extent, it shouldn't be seen as a lifestyle, or it shouldn't be something that should be seen as a cop out, I don't think. But at the same time, again, I understand it. I get it. I get why people end up in that kind of a situation, and often stay, especially in places like where I grew up, where the economy is the local and national economy is in tatters, and has been for decades now. People often see welfare as a better way to live in some ways, because you can get access to benefits for housing, so you can pay your rent. It's like you got your rent covered if you have a house. And often people have got it's complicated, because sometimes people are in work and then they find themselves, for whatever reason, the company goes bust or something just doesn't work out, and it's harder to get another job. So it's like, it's complicated. It's not a black or white kind of situation. There's a lot of nuance to it. So it's like, it's not simple as just saying, oh well, everyone on benefits is lazy, or because it's not. That's just not the truth of it. Sure, I'm sure there are certainly a small percentage of people living loosely, but on welfare that are lazy and are unmotivated and don't care. But again, there are factors behind that. It's not just because people are lazy. It's because people have gotten used to. They've gotten used to it, and And it's often because they haven't got any aspiration, because those things were never drilled into them. They've got no ambitions because they were never told to have any. They were never these qualities that you often see in the middle classes, they weren't instilled into them from being young. And so they grow up, with very little in the way of hope for a future. And often a lot of them end up living very tedious, mediocre lives. Sure, you have a few people here and there that break out the system and go on to do well in life, but those are more exceptions, really. They're very, very, very small numbers of people, and often it's because they were lucky enough to have met certain people, or were in the right places at the right time, had the right opportunities. Maybe they had something about their personality or something, whatever it was, maybe they were smart in some way, or they were manipulative in some sense, or did something. And often, I think in the end, that's often how you end up, that's the only kind of way you end up getting out of those kind of situations, really. Shit situations. Because if you're not smart, if you're not manipulative, even to some extent, if you're not exploitative in some way, then you'll find it extremely difficult to break out of that. So in the end, the only thing you can really do is to try to just got to use your initiative sometimes. You got to, maybe you do have to be a little bit flexible. Maybe you do have to find other ways of making money, however that is, whatever that means, whatever that involves. But I think in the end, for the average person in places where that would be classed as being working class areas, wherever it is in the world, where these places are, then, like I said, the average man, the average woman's got no chance. Because even if they have a job, sure, they'll be able to afford the little comfortable week or two's holiday once a year, the odd, bank holiday, whatever. Maybe a couple of days off at Christmas or whatever, but for the most part, you're going to be grafting your ass off. You're going to be constantly stressed out, constantly under pressure for most of the year. And what do you really have to show for it at the end of the day? All right, you've got a TV, you've got a laptop, you've got a phone. Well, I've got those things. I don't make much money at all. So it's like, okay. But what does it mean to have? What does work even mean anymore these days? Because, and like I talked about before, with technology improving all the time and AI becoming more and more, it's seeping into the world of employment more and more. Where do we end up eventually? What does work become? What do we turn into? What do we transition into? What does work transition into over the next 20, 30, 40 years, when I assume the vast areas of various sectors of work will be dominated by technology? I'm guessing maybe even within the next 20 years, 10 years maybe, who knows? I don't know, but it's I don't know. I just don't think work is really worth it in the end, unless you've got a serious skill, a serious career. But not everyone's cut out for those things. Unfortunately, that's just a harsh truth that we have to accept. Is that not everyone's going to have the right training, the right access to certain opportunities that they would need to improve their lives. It's. I wish that wasn't the case, but it is, because there's only so much money to go around, and often people see you worth based on your age. And if you're over a certain age, then people say, well, I'm going to get less time out of you, so I can't bring myself to invest in you. And that shouldn't be how it is, but that is how it is. Once you reach over a certain age, it's good luck to you. If you're in your late teens, early 20s, mid 20s, and people are going to see that they can mold you and shape you, and you'd likely to get much more access to training opportunities. But when you're over, say, 30, 35, 40 or beyond, you've written off. And it gets harder as well as you get older, because you don't have as much metabolism, you don't have as much resilience, you don't have as much mental energy, physical energy, emotional capabilities anymore to deal with a lot of shit. So it gets harder. Life gets harder as you get older. It gets harder to tolerate bullshit and drama. So my conclusion is, I say conclusion, but my leaning is that I don't really think work is really truly worth it for the average person, unless you can get access to some kind of skills or training, apprenticeships. You can go to college, university, something that can really propel you forward. But those opportunities are few and far between, and they're often limited to those that are younger. And that's partly because it's easy to educate people when they're younger. So I don't know. I'm not suggesting. Look, but it doesn't really matter anyway. We're certainly heading towards mass unemployment as the coming decades come upon us. So it doesn't. I don't really think it matters that much these days. I think now the best thing you can do is just to try and find something you can tolerate, for however long, until you're thrust into a universal basic income situation, like the vast majority of people will be at some point, when work will no longer be part of our lives. And we're heading towards a bizarre future. I wish we went, but the way I see things going, millions of people are going to be unemployed. So I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what they're going to replace. What do you do when you don't have work anymore? How do you function as a society? How do you deal with that mass explosion of mental health issues because of it? I don't think this is. I don't think we're heading towards something positive. And, my only hope is that as time goes on, maybe the cost of living will come down, and maybe in the end it will, universal basic income will be able to improve our lives in some ways, but it will be at the expense of responsibility. What impact will that have on the average person? When you take away their sense of identity, their sense of accountability, their sense of responsibilities, I don't know. I don't even really know how that will work. Do you really expect everyone to become creatives and artists, musicians, painters? It's not going to happen. So how much is that going to cost? Trillions of dollars. I have no idea, but I just don't know what. I don't know what to make of the world of work anymore. I don't even really know what it means to work anymore when so much of our work is done by technology anyway, done through software now, computers, even our phones, So what is the future of work? It's certainly not as it was when we were growing up. So, either we're heading towards some revolutionary forms of work, or we're heading towards mass unemployment, or a mixture of the both. Is work really worth it? I don't tend to think that it is. And actually in many ways it's a trap, because, like I said before, it's the more money as time goes on, the value of your salary gets lower. the more money that you earn, the more you get taxed, the more that gets taken away from you. So, I don't know, is it fair? Is work even really fair? Is it a fair system? Is it a moral thing? I don't know. It certainly gives us something to do, something to focus on, something to distract us from other elements of life. But, but that often means then that you're contracted not only with your work, but then you're contracted in other ways, because now you've got bills to pay for. You've got responsibilities now. You've got shit to pay for all the time. Things that you wouldn't have had if you didn't have. I don't know. I don't know what the solutions are. It's complicated. I don't know what you do. I don't know. I don't think there are any easy solutions to these things. I don't think people should be unemployed, but then I don't always think that work is worth people's time either, unless you're earning a lot of money, where you can say within 5 or 10 years earn enough money where you can actually, and if you've got the right skills and experience, where you can move somewhere you really want to go to. But that isn't the case for most people. Most people aren't earning enough money. Most people aren't in skilled or useful jobs or careers that they could use. They could be that are transferable, but they're not in great jobs or careers that they could use in another country for the most part. And with automation, with the implementation of AI robots, over time, those opportunities will dwindle, because it'll be cheaper in the end for big companies, big businesses to, over time, as the technology gets more affordable, to just employ the use of technology. So it'll be harder then to move to other parts of the world. That's my guess. Unless you've got skills in AI, you've got training with automation. So, maybe that's the thing. Then maybe that's what we should all be looking at now, is how do we get into AI? How do we get into some kind of, ironically, some kind of work involving automation, some kind of technician-based work or something. I don't know, whatever it is, something that would be a useful skill. Maybe that's that's the only thing left at this point. But again, that'll become an oversaturated market. All of those things will be. Whatever jobs remain over the coming decades, they'll all become oversaturated, and there'll be endless competition, and I don't think that will be particularly great either. So however you look at this, we're not heading towards some utopian world here, I don't think. Work has always been about the exploitation of people's labour or people's skills or people's knowledge for the sake of other people's benefit, so that other people can earn more money than you ever will. Even though you work just as hard, if not in some ways harder than the people that make more money than you do. So, it's never been a fair system. That's what capitalism is. It's not an equal exchange of power or goods or anything. It's an unequal balance of power, controlled resources, influence, and leverage. That's all it is. That's all it will ever be. That might, if work ever will pay, then, the only way work pays, the only way work is worth it, is if you can save a few $100 or a few £100 every month and put it into a high interest savings account every month. But who can say that they're doing that these days? For the average person, that is. Sure, if you've got a fucking, if you're a doctor or engineer or a fucking lecturer or something like that or whatever, then yeah, great, that's great. But you see that the world doesn't operate on hard work. The world operates on other people's perceptions of your value based on how intelligent you are. It's not about hard work. It's about how can other people get something out of you that benefits them. That's how the world operates. It's an exchange, but it's not an equal exchange. It's an exchange of, I will pay you a certain amount of money, but you're going to give me your skills, you're going to give me your knowledge, you're going to give me your experience, and I'm not going to pay you anywhere near what I should be paying you, because that would eat into my profits. So, and even if it would just be by a few, less than 1% or whatever, but it's always that. It's always about that. It's always just constant greed and just doing one over on people, screwing people over all the time. That's how this world operates. It's the same over here with teaching. You get paid fuck all for 35, 40 hours a week. Sometimes you work 6 days a week, and then you're expected to do other duties that have got nothing to do with your role at all as well, and you get drafted into shit left, right, and centre. And it's just a scam. It's all a con. The whole world of average employment is a huge fucking scam. And utility bills are skyrocketing. People get, we're talking about companies that are raking in fucking billions of pounds every year. These massive food corporations, they're breaking in millions of pounds every year. It makes you sick. Makes you sick. The whole fucking system is rotten to the fucking core, man. It really is. It's nothing but a system of exploitation. It's just a more sophisticated way of exploitation. That's what the 21st century is. In the Western world, that is. It's a shame, but that's how it works. So the best thing you can do is to do whatever the fuck you can, man. You got to, whatever you've got to do. If it means taking a few little shitty jobs until you can find something better, then maybe that's the only thing you can do. Now, I don't suggest people staying unemployed for the rest of their lives. That's not going to bring you any kind of any freedom or any independence. But in many ways, work won't either. But at least you'll have some more comfort. At least you'll have some more conveniences where you can tolerate the fucking pit of misery that is your life. Because that's essentially what work becomes about in the end. It's less about the money. It's more about the things you're surrounded by. I don't know. Whatever. You gotta do what you gotta do to get by in this world. You gotta survive as best as you can. But I don't believe in being an epic fucking wanker in the process. I don't think that you have to abandon your morals for the sake of it. And often in the world of work, you end up having to do that. If you want to get on, if you want to improve, then you often have to abandon certain morals, certain ethics. And if you're willing to do that, then you do that. But I don't know. I think it's up to you. You got to decide who you are. You got to decide what you want out of life. But you also have to accept that you've got certain limitations that you will forever struggle to deal with. And now those things, whether it's trauma, whether it's a lack of intelligence, whether it's a lack of education, skills, knowledge, whether it's mental health problems, physical health, emotional issues, insecurities, just various different aspects of your personality that make it difficult for you to be liked in some way or other by certain people. Whatever the fuck it is, you're always gonna come up against people that don't like you, don't want you, don't value you, don't respect you, and you can't avoid it. And you certainly can't avoid it in the world of work. Well, you can, but often it means that you end up getting a letter through the post from HR saying you've been sacked, or having a meeting with the boss. So it's often, work is more about tolerance. It's all about tolerating endless amounts of bullshit for a salary that's nowhere near what it should be. And in a society where things are getting more and more expensive and wages aren't increasing in line with inflation. It's not. How is that fair? How is that in any way a way to operate a society? How do you incentivize people to work, to get people into work, keep people into work, and then complain when like a certain population, a percentage of the population end up on welfare? Well, that's why, because it's not. Who wants to work 40 hours a week, getting up at 5 to 6 o'clock in the morning for nowhere near as much money as you should have for that amount of hours per week, for the amount of effort you have to put in, for the amount of fucking bullshit you have to deal with every single day? Is it fucking worth it? Is it? I don't know. You tell me. I don't know. I can tell you over here, it's not worth it. You know, for the average teacher, you're looking at best 35 to 40, maybe at most 45,000 baht per month. I don't even think that's a fact. I don't know what that is. It's probably maybe $1,000 per month. I mean, it's better than nothing. Yeah, sure. But like, for the amount of hours, you're talking about, you've no idea the level of stress and pressure involved in it, and planning and all the fucking bureaucracy and the bullshit and all the paperwork involved at schools and all that crap. It's not fucking worth it. It's not worth it. You know, if the average salary was like $2,500, $3,000 per month, then okay, fair enough, whatever, fine. So you just don't earn enough money. You just don't get enough money to make it worthwhile. It doesn't work. Doesn't always equal well-being, doesn't always equate to improved quality of life necessarily. It just means you're more comfortable, but it doesn't mean that your life's going anywhere. You've just got money in your pocket, but it doesn't mean that you're improving or you're evolving or your life's working towards somewhere that's better. It just means you can afford to pay for your house, you can afford to eat, you can afford to drink, you can afford a holiday every once in a while. You can afford to pay for your car that's getting on in years. You can afford to pay for your shit that you've got on that are paying for in installments because you can't afford to pay it outright. So you're technically in debt. So it's all a scam, man. It's all a fucking big con. It's all about money. Everything's about money all the time. You don't have any real freedom. Your freedom is bound by how much money you have, and whether you have any money at all. That's just the fucking bottom line of it. The less money you have, the less freedom you have. The more money you have, to some extent, in some ways, you have a little bit more freedom. You certainly have more freedom to buy things that you want. Well, in some ways, anyway. But, it's like, I don't know, I just think it's the whole lot of it's all rotten, it's all... I think it's all. I personally, I think a lot of the West is decomposing. I think it's on its last legs. I think the world, I don't know. It's just, to me, it's just the West dying. It's been dying a death for decades now, and I think it's probably in its death rattle stage, in my opinion. The way things seem to be now, I think, it just seems to be, to me, to be all. It's fucked. It's all fucked. And, if you ever get rid of the welfare system, then I don't know. There's nothing left, is there? Because once you get rid of most people's jobs through the use of automation, the use of AI, robotics, it's game over for the average person. It's just game over. We all know that. And if you ever get rid of the welfare system as well, or you replace it with a universal basic income and some kind of social credit system, which is probably what's coming down the line, then fucking well done. Well done. You're in utopia. You've reached the fucking dystopian reality. That's where we're heading. I think that's where we are heading for. People can say what they want, but I think we are slowly heading towards that way of life, where look, it's not about hard work in the end. Hard work doesn't really mean anything anymore. It used to. It used to, because you used to be able to afford to buy a house and to have a quality of life that you actually liked and you enjoyed and you got something out of it. And you could afford to have kids. You could afford to have a couple of holidays per year. Now you can. Or if you can, you're often paying it off in installments. Most people can't afford to have like several holidays per year now. Not unless you're in a relationship or you're married where you're lucky enough to have 2 or 3 incomes or whatever. If you've got, people staying with you or something, then you can sort of make it work. But like, if you're living on your own, then good luck. Even if you are married to someone, it's like you might not both be making enough money, and it's like most of your income's probably if you're lucky enough to have found somewhere you like a house you like, then you'll be paying that off for the next 20 years. So it's like you either end up having to tolerate a very mediocre life, or you end up in a situation where you essentially are in debt. You're always in debt. And if you think for 1 second that your local authorities give a fuck about you, if your government gives a fuck about you, if your local MPs, politicians, police, councils, like I said, your authorities, whatever, they don't give a fuck about you. They want you to pay your bills. They want you to pay your council tax, pay your bills, shut the fuck up, abide by the law, conform, and know your place. That's all they want. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't care about your struggles, your problems. Even the health service doesn't give a fuck about you. All they're about is saving money. They want you out the door as quickly just as quick as you came in. Yeah, there's some tablets. Fuck off. Yeah, there you go. Signature signed. There's your prescription. Fuck off and die. Oh, you're feeling unwell. You got mental health problems. We don't care. Yeah, you got to do this now. Oh well, you have to think positive and be happy then, won't you? Sorry. People don't give a fuck about anyone anymore. No one cares. No one gives a fuck anymore. That's what social media has bred. It's bred this apathy of it's led to this state of the world where we completely lack compassion and empathy now. Everything's either just one big fucking joke, or it's just what can I get out of it? What can I get out of this? Everything's about me, fucking me in this world. It's nothing but selfish, self-absorbed, fucking greedy, fucking mean-spirited, egotistical world that we live in. And those that rule over us, they couldn't give a fuck about your struggles. They could not give a shit. They don't care about you or me. They don't care about anyone. As long as they've got their fucking nice little cushy, fucking 6-figure salary, whatever, they couldn't give a fuck about the impact of their policies, of their decisions, of cutting funding for this, of, withdrawing from this project that would have helped create so many jobs, whatever. They don't care. They don't give a fuck. They'll only put money in places where they think that the people are worthy of it. They don't. Apart from that, they don't give a shit about the poor or those in relative poverty. They couldn't care less. Because most of the people running this world are psychopaths, basically. Egomaniac types. And I really mean that. They are. They're the kind of people that would fucking fly a jet around your local area and just crash it into someone's poor house just for the sake of it. They don't give a fuck. This world doesn't operate on empathy and compassion and morals and ethics. It operates on one thing and one thing only: money. Never, ever, ever, ever forget that. Because that's the way this world works. It's about money all the time. Everything and anything is about money, 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 money. And you're seen as someone that can either bring money to somebody or not. And if people don't think you're worthwhile, then they're not going to give you any opportunities. So in some ways, some people in this world will always be held back because of the way they sound, the way they look, because they haven't got the right intelligence, because they haven't got the right CV. Doesn't matter what you do. If you've got a blank on your CV, then you're fucked. That's it. Fucking good luck to you. Good luck explaining it. Good luck people giving you opportunities and chances. Even though there are real justifications for it, but people don't care. That's the way the world works. Sorry to be depressing, but, don't fucking shoot the messenger. I'm just saying. This world fucking sucks, man. It fucking sucks.